My entitled dad would never let me go on a field trip without causing a scene just to try and get back at my teachers, as he was convinced that all field trips were just a scheme for the teachers to make money. And I'm honestly just so embarrassed to deal with my dad, and now that he's in prison, I seriously hope I never have to deal with him ever again. Here's what happened. Okay, for a bit of background, my father was a single parent, but an extreme narcissist. He was awful to me all the time. He's actually been incarcerated in prison for 8 years, and that's counting the awful treatment he inflicted on my brother and me. So needless to say, I come from a broken and confusing family. My mother and father divorced when I was a few months old and my brother was 2 years old. My mother was an extreme addict and my father is a serial narcissist. They are quite the volatile pair, so I personally think that things may have been worse had they not divorced. In a surprising turn of events, the courts actually granted my grandparents custody of my brother and me, and I'm not sure exactly the details leading to that decision, but something tells me that it had to do with my mother being an addict and my father leaving my brother and I locked in the car during the court hearing. Our grandparents cared for us for 8 years, but ultimately gave my brother and I back to our father because he was constantly saying that he was going to get violent, and they simply couldn't take it anymore. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I don't know why or if they had authorities involved, but it is what it is, and all is said and done. Unfortunately, I can't ask them about it as they have passed away. After our father got us back, it was almost like it was his mission to make our lives miserable. The worst part about it is that doing this brought him pleasure. The more sadistic and cruel he was, the happier he'd be. He only interacted with us when he had to, and when he did, it was either for his own gain or to belittle or just treat us like garbage. He was a very sick man, and I'm grateful I was able to escape him when I was 16 years old. I have a restraining order against him, and word has it that when he was served the order, he was surprised, even though the reason he is in jail is because of the way he treated me. He was actually put up for parole evaluation in February, but that was thankfully denied. During his speech, he said, "I've hurt some people," but never specified or even mentioned my brother and me. He's disillusioned, disconnected, egotistical, and unremorseful. Now, with that bit of background out of the way, let me talk about a situation that happened when I was a kid. My father hated contributing to my school or anything that involved me doing something he had to pay for or something that he couldn't supervise, and this definitely included field trips. I wish I could say there was only one time this happened, but this was reoccurring every time that I brought home a permission slip. I would put it on the counter hours before he got home so that I was as far away from him as possible when he read it. It didn't matter if it was for the zoo, a movie, amusement park, or anything. His first and only reaction was anger, just pure anger. I think it stemmed from his contempt of giving my school any kind of money. I went to public school, so it wasn't like he was paying any tuition or boarding fees, and it's also not like we didn't have any money. My dad was always buying expensive car parts, items for his growing room, and other expensive items that were only for him. Yet if I needed $15 for a field trip or $20 for lunch money for the month, based off his reactions, you would think that I'm asking him to buy me a concert ticket every single week. When he would read these permission slips, he would start off on a tirade about how incompetent my teachers were and how pathetic they were for asking him for money, even though it was all directly going towards buying me tickets for an event or any other expenses for the event. It seemed like he thought the teachers were lining their pockets with his money, and I was the one that he would take it out on. Each time I gave him a slip, he would yell for about 15 minutes, and he would make sure that I heard it. This led to me feeling a lot of anger and shame about just wanting to have fun with my classmates, because he would make me feel like I was the problem, like I was too expensive and an inconvenience. It was a stark contrast to how my grandma would make me feel. She would actually volunteer for field trips and the school store just so she could be close to me while I was at school. To have that sudden contempt thrown at me by someone who's supposed to care for me after years of being validated by someone I loved and who loved me back, it was one of the many reasons I began to suffer from depression at 11 years old. Now, my father's next step was always the same. He would take a pen and write horrible things to my teacher on top of the permission slip. He would write about how incompetent and greedy they were, how they were lowlifes and idiots, how they just wanted his money even though my education was free. He would write on these permission slips top to bottom with a bunch of hate and insults all over them. But here's the thing, he'd still sign it though and provide the money so I could go, and he would still make me turn in the slip. He would make me hand the teachers these papers full of filth and hate, and obviously they knew it wasn't me who wrote it, but the shame and embarrassment that came from giving them those papers, it might have been easier on my conscience if I just never went on the field trips. These things were never reported recorded too, by the way, and I will never understand why. My father also always followed up to make sure I gave the teachers these slips and would ask me what their reactions were. And I would just say that I gave it to them, but they didn't say anything, which really was the truth. Fast forward, and when I was in the 8th grade, I was really becoming aware about the shame and embarrassment that my father's rants and egos would cause me. I remember that there was another field trip and I wanted to go, but there was no way I was going to give my father this slip for him to deface. So I found a check with his signature on it, and I just forged his signature. It wasn't great, it was sloppy and gritty, and you could tell that it was definitely forged. I thought I'd try my luck anyways, and I paid for the trip out of my own pocket. Well, I got caught immediately, and my teacher held a conference with me and the principal, but not my father. Now, in the moment, I believe that I just didn't do a good enough job, which may have been true, but now that I'm older, I realize that they knew I forged it because the paper wasn't covered in insults. They gave me another slip and gave me one more chance to have it signed properly. Now, I don't recall how the rest of that story went, or if I even went on the trip. I just remember the fear boiling in my belly, knowing that I had to talk to my father about forging his signature. Long story short, my father is a grade A piece of garbage. You should never jeopardize your child's mental well-being or integrity, all because you don't want to pay for a field trip. Just don't sign the thing and figure something else out. My dad viewed me as a pawn to get his awful and misguided points across, to try and establish dominance in a situation that had nothing to do with him. I have so many other experiences about him, and I really hope that this story resonated with someone. Wow, your dad really is a jerk. Like, that really is unfair for him to treat you like that, but also for him to go out of his way just to embarrass you. Like, why can't he just sign the slip and move along? Or go to the principal themselves and be like, hey, I don't like the fact that I have to pay all this money for a field trip. Like, that's the way you want to complain. You don't do that through your kid. Like, that seems so counterintuitive and just really ridiculous. So truly, I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. I'm sorry you had a dad who treated you like garbage, and hopefully you never have to deal with him ever again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for telling my rich classmate that not everyone has it financially as good as her? Because I'm honestly so tired of hearing about her rich person problems that it's starting to cause a divide in my friend group. And at this point, I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 30-year-old female and I'm in my 2nd year of university. And the classmate I called out is 19 years old. And for the sake of the story, we'll call her Ellen. That's not her real name. Now, I wouldn't call us friends, but we work together a lot because of a big assignment. And I often spent lunch with her and the same group of students. So we were kind of like colleagues. Ellen's parents own their own supermarket and are quite well off. And by well off, I mean they have a yacht, 2 vacation homes, and 4 cars. Now, I know this fact because Ellen has a habit of bringing up her financial status on a regular basis. At the beginning of the year, it didn't annoy me because it was just casually mentioned now and then, and she wasn't hurting anyone with it. But as time went on, this changed to her actively trying to turn the conversation towards the topic, often during times where it would be considered tone deaf. For example, another classmate that we will call Elise, that's not her real name, got into a car accident and had to stay in the hospital. As she was sharing her experience during lunch, Ellen said to us, "Oh, I got into a really bad accident too once on my yacht. I lost my balance and fell backwards. My neck was sore for days." But the situation where I called her out was this one. Ellen's best friend, who we will call Lydia, had her backpack and laptop stolen and was crying uncontrollably. Ellen gave her a hug and actually said, "You don't need to cry, you could just buy a new one." Lydia said that she couldn't do that, to which Ellen replied, "Oh, come on, it's not that expensive. With the software we need, a laptop of $1,200 should be enough." Well, I replied by saying, "Ellen, not everyone is as financially comfortable as you." Well, when I said that, Ellen clearly didn't like that. She raised her voice and told me that people only see the money, but they don't see how much effort she has put in to get it. That she works at her parents' supermarket every Sunday, and that she deserves every coin that she owns. I told her that I didn't mean that she doesn't deserve it, and that it is a good thing that she doesn't have to worry about money, but that she should consider that most of our fellow students have a different situation. Now, it didn't get mentioned anymore, but the overall mood has been quite cold since then, and I'm wondering if maybe I went too far. Both my boyfriend and best friend, both in their 30s, said that I should have ignored this, because they say 19 years old is basically still a kid, and that it's not my job to teach her empathy. So honestly, am I the jerk in this situation? Because at this point, I really don't know what to do. Your boyfriend and your friend, in my opinion, are completely wrong. Being 19 years old does not mean that you're still a kid, kid, and you absolutely can learn empathy long before that age. Like, your friend Ellen is a complete spoiled brat, and in my opinion, she absolutely got handouts from her parents. Like, I don't know many supermarket jobs where they work like, what, minimum wage, if not just a little bit higher, and they're somehow magically able to afford a laptop that costs well over $1,000. Like, I don't know about you, but that kind of expendable income at the drop of a hat isn't always easy to come by, especially as a college student. Like, I don't know about you, but I was broke as a college student. I had no money, and I couldn't just spend that kind of money on a new laptop. So for Ellen to be like, oh, that's okay, just buy a new one, it's like, wow, you are very immature and you seriously cannot read the room. And no, it's not because they're 19 years old. And if anything, it's just indicative of the fact that they definitely are so out of touch. Like, Ellen has no idea how the real world works because mommy and daddy are definitely not struggling. So she has no clue what it's like to struggle financially. She has no idea what it's like to go without food or to go without money or even like basic necessities of life. So when someone like this chimes in and says, oh yeah, I hurt my neck on my yacht, I know exactly how your car accident feels. Like, at that point, you almost want to scream out, oh my God, shut up, Ellen. We don't want to hear about your rich person injury. So no, you are definitely not the jerk. Your classmate's being incredibly stupid when she says stuff like that. And in my opinion, I don't blame you for calling her out in the slightest. Am I the jerk for turning away my new neighbor and her child after they once again showed up to my house unannounced? Because right now I'm being called rude. And at this point, I'm seriously not sure what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 26-year-old female and I just moved into a new small apartment block 2 weeks ago. And since we moved in, we've been busy setting up furniture and just setting up the place in general. The afternoon that I moved in, one of my neighbors came up to the steps. And for reference, each apartment has a little front area and mine faces the car park. She introduced herself as a single mom with a 4-year-old daughter and gave me a succulent to say welcome. I was very appreciative. I said thank you, and then we spoke for a few minutes. I work 3 days from home and am usually home in the evening after work and at night. Well, this neighbor has started showing up a lot. I can generally hear her approaching with her daughter, and they'll show up with a painting or something the daughter has made to give me. It is nice, but I do prefer to keep to myself, and often I'm kind of in my pajamas, so I'm not really dressed for any kind of visitors. So I have to kind of make myself presentable in under a minute with no notice. This last instance, they showed up at 7:00 p.m. The daughter had made some kind of drawing and wanted to drop it off. Now, I had had a long day. I was sitting in a giant sweater on my couch eating ice cream, and I was just trying to watch a film. And when I saw them through the window, I had to quickly jump up, put on shorts, and greet them at the door. I said thank you as always, and the daughter wanted to come in and see what I was watching. It was nothing terrible, but just maybe a little bit too grown up for a 4-year-old. I politely said, look, thank you, but I'm not really in the mood tonight. Could you please leave? My neighbor responded by saying, but she's just a kid. It'll only be a few minutes. She loves making things to show you. I said to her, look, I'm child-free by choice. Can you please leave? Thank you and have a good night. Well, ever since then, they have not been back, but they did leave a note in my mailbox explaining that I was rude and her daughter was upset. She apparently cried and they would be open to an apology. Now, I haven't responded, but I don't want to apologize. So honestly, am I the jerk in this situation for turning them away? Because right now, I'm really not sure what to do. Wow, the way that mom is acting is really obnoxious. Like, she knows you work from home and you probably work a lot to some degree. So for her to be like, oh, come on, just let my kid in and roam around your house. It's like, sure, this is cool, but like, you can't just stop by unannounced. That's my opinion at least. And it sounds like the original poster had the same idea. Apparently, they said they're going to speak to the neighbor in person in the morning and say that they're sorry for their choice of words, but they want to have a boundary in place that they can't just show up unannounced. They have plans to not be combative in any kind of way, and they just want to have this conversation person to person. And in my opinion, I think that's a really good idea. So hopefully when you have this conversation, you can set up some kind of boundary, because in my opinion, the way that she was acting by just showing up all the time out of nowhere was completely disrespectful and honestly a little bit obnoxious. Am I the jerk for not sharing my food with my girlfriend after I asked her multiple times if she wanted to order anything when I order my food? Because right now she's calling me selfish for not sharing, despite the fact that I haven't had anything to eat for over 30 hours because I needed to get ready for a minor examination at a hospital. Here's what happened. Okay, so this week I had a minor examination at the hospital that required me to not eat for 24 hours prior to the test. My appointment was also delayed by 4 hours, so by the time it was done and by the time I got home, it was over 32 to 34 hours since I had eaten anything. Now, because of this, I was very hungry and tired, so I decided to order some food. I asked my girlfriend if she wanted anything, but she said no. My girlfriend said that she would rather cook than order out, but I said I'd prefer a takeaway so we can just have separate meals. She said that she would have rathered we both just cooked, but I again refused and told her I'm ordering myself some food. So I ordered the food and she decided not to cook and just said that she didn't want anything. Once my food came, I was sat eating and she came over and asked if she could have some. I then asked her if she was serious. I pointed out that I had asked her multiple times if she wanted anything and that she's waiting for me to sit and enjoy my food just to try and take it. I mentioned that I ordered exactly what I want just because of how hungry I am, but she just said she was hungry too since she hadn't eaten. I mentioned that the only reason she hadn't eaten was because I didn't want to cook for her, but that doesn't mean that she can come over and just take my food instead. I said if she wants something to eat, she can either order something for herself or she can cook something, but I'm not sharing what I ordered. Well, she said I was being too selfish and that I have enough to share, so I should be fine sharing with her. She said she's not asking for much and that I'm being unfair, but I don't see how I am since I offered to order her something multiple times. So honestly, am I the jerk in this situation? Because right now I'm really frustrated and I seriously don't know what to do. No, I don't think you're the jerk at all, but also this story is really funny to me. I mean, you did ask her multiple times, hey, do you want to order anything as well? Because I'm sure you would have ordered it no problem and brought it along with your own food. So for her to sit there after you haven't eaten for like what, 30 plus hours and request that you give over your food to her, like that seems really unfair to me, and honestly, I just don't think that was okay. And I'm willing to bet that she knew you were in the hospital, right? Like there's no way she didn't know you had to go without food for over 24 hours, right? Like how could she know that information and then be like, oh yeah, give me some of your food? Like if my significant other had gone through some kind of medical treatment and they had not eaten in 30 hours, I would be pampering them like crazy. I would get her food and water or whatever else she needed. But it seems like your girlfriend took a really selfish approach, and in my opinion, that is just not cool. So no, you are definitely not the jerk in this scenario, and I think the way your girlfriend tried to like turn this against you, in my opinion, is super unfair. Am I the jerk for not cleaning up garbage in my neighbor's yard? Because right now, my neighbor is upset with me as they assume that I'm the reason their yard is messy, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I live in a 2-flat with landlords in the other half, so it's important that I be a good neighbor. Otherwise, I just roll my eyes at this and move along. I'm not a huge fan of the next door neighbors and their very loud dogs, but I choose to just not interact with them. I have a small container garden that is mostly herbs, some tomatoes that do well in containers, and echinacea. Since native pollinators and other beneficial insects live or lay eggs in the dead stuff for the winter, I don't clean up last year's garden until I'm ready to plant the current year's garden. I do what I have to revive perennials early in the season, but last year's dead annuals stay put until I'm planting. As it's not quite time yet, all my annual seedings are still inside. Now, all that is to illustrate that I never have empty pots left sitting outside. The ugly dead stuff gets stacked up and pulled in towards my door, but it would have to be hurricane force winds for any of it to blow away, since we're talking about large planters full of dirt. Now, it has been a windy day here, as is common in the springtime, so some trash has been blown around. A little over a week ago, I noticed an empty pot that isn't mine sitting in my neighbor's yard, and this really will be important later on. Their dogs were playing with it, and I figured it was either theirs or it had blown in, and they were letting the dogs have some fun with it until trash day. But unfortunately, I was wrong. It turns out, since I'm the one who has a garden, they assumed it was mine, and they were stewing about it, and the fact that I didn't go over there to pick it up all week. I mean, nobody even said a word to me. Then, yesterday, I was leaving and I saw the empty pot had been stuck on top of one of my pots with a perennial echinacea in it, crushing some of the new leaves that were coming up. Now, it is a hardy plant and it will recover, but that was still a rude thing to do, especially when I have stacks of planters full of dead things they could have just put it on. My landlords happen to be outside too, and they told me that neighbor is really upset that I didn't go pick up my garbage that blew into their yard. They continue that even if it wasn't mine, it still has the appearance of being mine, since I'm the one with the patio full of planters. Never mind that all my planters match and this one didn't. Also, never mind the fact that all my planters have enough weight to not blow away at all times, and this one was completely empty. The argument is that I should have just taken responsibility for the trash planter because I also happen to engage with that hobby. For what it's worth, the planter was cracked and unusable. So honestly, what do you think? Due to my hobby, should I have grabbed this planter from their yard just to avoid the appearance of my stuff blowing over there in the wind? Even though this is not the case, just to avoid conflict? What should I do? Okay, first and foremost, there's no way I would ever put up with that. Like, not only do you not have to clean up that mess in the yard, but the fact that you also enjoy gardening doesn't suddenly mean that you're responsible for someone else's mess in another person's yard. Like, that is honestly ridiculous, and there's no good excuse for that. And the fact that your landlord would be like, oh, but it looks like it might have been yours, so it's time for you to clean it up. You need to do the right thing and avoid the appearance that it might have been you. No, I don't think you need to do that at all. I think if anything, you need to go to the neighbor that's upset with you and explain that, hey, this is not my potted plant. Mine are up there and they're definitely not blowing away. So no, this is not your responsibility, and it is absolutely insane and unfair that your landlord would assume that this is your responsibility. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.